So the first video I made on this topic did actually decently well for Tanki. So I thought with Tanki Classic coming pretty soon, this would be the perfect time to make a part 2 to the original video. And with Tanki being over 16 years old now, a lot of current players likely haven't experienced the game in its original state. So if you haven't seen the original video, I'd highly recommend checking that out after this one. Make sure to let me know in the comments how many things from this list you remember. And let's get into another 10 things only Tanki Online OGs will remember. You could rent augments when they first released. Now this actually was a more recent fact since alterations were added back in 2016, but considering that's 9 years ago now, you're still relatively OG if you played in 2016. Now the augments we currently have today are nothing like the initial alterations from 2016, since back then they barely impacted the turret's parameters. Back when alterations were added, you could only rent them for a short amount of time. Today you can either buy them for a few 100,000 crystals or get them permanently from containers. Upgrades used to have a timer. Now in the past, you used to have to wait entire days for that upgrade to finish. If you were impatient, you could spend a ton of crystals to bypass the waiting time. Now this was back in the day where sales were like 70% off for speed ups and 50% off for normal upgrades, and you would always wait for that because speed up times were annoying to wait through. No one liked doing it, so you would just always wait for the 70% discount on the speed up prices. So Tanki finally removed the upgrade timer a few years ago, but honestly it was a pretty big core aspect of upgrading your turret in old Tanki, and I'm honestly excited for it to come back in Tanki Classic. Even if it definitely was an annoying part, it added a lot to the specialness of upgrading your turret. Now critical damage used to only be for Smokey. In current Tanki, everyone knows critical damage as basically the main way you deal damage with the turret. If you're not dealing critical damage in a fight, you're usually not going to win that one-on-one fight. Whereas in old Tanki, critical damage wasn't really a thing. If you were in a one-on-one fight, the main thing you could do to win it was use obstacles around you to hide, try to circle the enemy so that they couldn't hit their shots as much. There was a lot more skill in old Tanki without the critical damage, and the only turret you could actually use critical damage with was Smokey. But Smokey in general wasn't that powerful of a turret. It was decent back in the day, but it wasn't like Firebird or Railgun. So overall, most people didn't really even notice critical damage on Smokey. Now it used to be really hard to rank up and earn crystals. In current Tanki, you can rank up extremely fast. I did a challenge a year or two ago and got over halfway to legend in just 17 hours. Now obviously I had super OP stuff on my account at the time, but if I could get basically halfway to legend with the most OP stuff, an average player can get to legend in like a few months if they're playing pretty normally. Whereas back in the day, I remember I got to Warrant Officer 5 and that took me from like 2011 to 2016. Now obviously I was a little kid, I wasn't playing all the time, but still 5 years to get maybe a quarter of the way through the ranks, not even, was like insane. It was also really hard to earn crystals back then. Like a lot of people would just camp the crystal box drop zones. I know that's what I did in the few days before sales, just trying to get enough to get like the M1 upgrade for Railgun. It was just a lot more difficult back in the day without premium. And premium wasn't even in the game back in the day for the first few years. I believe they added it in like mid 2010s. It could have been a little bit earlier, but even then on top of that, the main thing you purchased back in the day was supplies. And that was kind of it. You could also purchase crystals, but the prices for crystals were pretty ridiculous, so no one really did. Each rank would also allow you to get new upgrades for certain turrets and hulls, so it was important that each rank felt special. Tanki Online used to have a completely different tutorial as well. Now, there was actually a few years there between like 2019 to 2024 where Tanki didn't have a tutorial. They removed it completely when they switched over to the HTML version of the game. But Tanki finally added a new one in 2024, but it's a pretty simple one. It just takes you into a map when you destroy a few players, and that's basically the gist of the tutorial. Whereas the old tutorial was a completely different journey with you leaping across these giant gaps, killing people with different turrets. It was such an immersive tutorial. You used to be able to have more than 300 friends in your friends list. So in current Tanki, and I believe over the last like 5 to 6 years, your max friend limit has been 300. Now this was initially changed because if you had too many friends in your friends list, it would lag out your game whenever you tried to open the list. So a ton of players would compete to see who could get the most friends in their friends list, especially YouTubers like Claudio and Alpha. They had thousands of people in their friends list, but with the technical limits, Tanki reduced it to 300 max friends. And even though the technical limitations are gone now, I think they just kept it at 300 max friends for whatever reason. Now repair kits used to heal for full seconds at a time. Now the repair kit now, you'll heal, and then the second you take any damage, you'll instantly stop healing. But back in the day, when you used your repair kit, you would heal just for full seconds at a time. So everyone would save the repair kit for when the gold was dropping, or when they were in a one-on-one fight, because they were basically unkillable while that repair kit was active. Nowadays, you'll wait until you're out of a fight or you'll run away to use your repair kit, whereas back in the day, you didn't care if you were in a fight, you would use it and you would basically be safe for a few seconds. Smart cooldowns were only introduced in 2014. So many players have forgotten, but true OGs will remember that the smart cooldown of supplies wasn't even in the game until 2014. All battles, you would just use all your supplies at once, and this is kind of where the era of druggers and people who spent money on supplies would basically dominate every single game they were in. Now, it definitely wasn't nearly as bad when smart supplies were added. The druggers still basically dominated games, and that was probably one of the core complaints of Tanki Online back in the day, was people who bought supplies would dominate battles. The number 9 is the shop used to be completely different. Now, I'm sure a lot of you can remember those $17 and $60 bundles that came into the game in like 2016, 2017, where the $17 bundles would have a normal paint that was unique to that event, and you would buy it and then you would get the unique event paint. And then when they added animated paints, the $60 bundles were added, where you would get a new unique animated paint for the event, and you would also have the $17 bundle if you didn't want to spend nearly as much. Now, those bundles are still kind of in the game today, but we don't really get any unique paints. But I'm talking more about just the overall shop in general, not the bundles that you could buy. Like, you used to be able to buy special paints from the shop for real money. The first ever paint I bought was the lime paint, and it's probably one of my most used paints of all time, up until maybe when I got some animated paints and I started using those. But before animated paints were in the game, those shop paints were really something special, on top of like the frost paint or the golden star paint. But in general, the shop was just, it was a lot more aesthetically pleasing for me. Maybe I've been playing the game for too long, but the prices weren't too bad. But for back in the day, $17 bundles for a kid like me wasn't terrible, especially when I just spent my birthday money on Tanki. So for the last fact that only OGs will remember, it's that Dictator Railgun was the original railgun combo. Now, everyone thinks of Hornet Railgun when you think of a railgun combo, but Hornet wasn't added until 2011. So the main combo you used from 2009 to 2011 was Dictator Railgun. Now, Dictator Railgun was another mode that was decently popular in the early years of Tanki, but since has been overshadowed by Hornet Railgun. They also made the Dictator Railgun mode in pro battles to kind of reminisce on the old combo that used to massively overtake the game. But yeah, those are another 10 facts only OGs remember. Let me know how many of the 10 facts you remembered in the comments down below. And again, check out my first video if you haven't. That's another 10 facts right there. So it's definitely a fun challenge to go through and see if you remember anything from like 10 to 15 years ago. And for a lot of you players who were probably born after Tanki released, you can at least, learn some stuff about old Tanki that you might have not been able to play and appreciate at the time because you might have been too young. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you still play Tanki Online, don't forget to use creator tag Taspens, just settings account. Use my creator tag. That helps me a ton. See you guys in a future video. Goodbye, everybody.